I now call the July 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. First order of business is the adoption of our agenda. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda has been adopted. And now we move to our Pledge of Allegiance. Kendall Sanders, the board's student advisor, will lead us in reciting the pledge. And Kendall, we didn't require you to make a speech today, okay?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Next, we will have our report on Student Program Safety Task Force recommendations. I turn to the Acting Superintendent, Mr. Winston, for this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coming to the podium is our Chief of Staff, Laura Francisco, who has been leading this work, and she will introduce the two members who will give this report.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairperson McCray, members of the board, and Mr. Winston. Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce the report of the Student Program Safety Task Force. Building on the foundation of CMS's Circle of Safety, the task force and an internal team worked for a year to review, evaluate, and recommend additional ways to support and ensure the safety of students in our schools, particularly when they are working with outside groups and programs. Though the work of the task force has concluded, CMS is continuously improving and strengthening our safety and security measures, and this work is part of that ongoing process. Julia Jones, who is our manager of district strategy, and Amy Daniels, who is a task force member, but also the director of outreach for Christ Lutheran Church and president of McPie, McClintock Partners in Education, will present findings and recommendations to you, and of course, we're happy to answer any questions you have. Julia?
Thank you, Laura. Okay, well, let's jump right in. So some of this Laura already alluded to, but this task force really came out of a broader effort to strengthen the circle of safety. So as you know, we already have several measures in place to keep students safe. And when it comes to volunteers and external programs, we do already have solid screening in place. We require that volunteers get a criminal background check, which is updated nightly. We require that contractors have a criminal, that they certify that their employees have had criminal background checks, and every visitor to a CMS building is screened through the lobby guard system to ensure that they're not on the sex offenders list. So with that in mind, we really came together to identify additional ways that we can improve safety and put systems in place that just strengthen what we already do. This is a result of a year of work. So back in April of last year, that's when we first started talking about having a task force. We pulled together some key internal CMS folks to kind of figure out the scope and how we should approach the work. Then we recruited community members to join the task force. So from August to September, we had a community task force that met once a month, and then we had an internal core team that met weekly to kind of either take recommendations from the task force and try and flesh them out to get feedback on different things, really to design pieces of this. So we went through that process, and by the end of May, we had initial recommendations, which we're going to share with you today. Before I jump in, let me give you a little bit of background. So our students are working with volunteers every day. There are more than 37,000 volunteers working in CMS, and it's really important to know that there are a range of ways that volunteers are involved. Some are in the office and never interact with kids. Some are in the classroom fully supervised by a teacher. But others may be on the 5th grade field trip to Washington, D.C., and they are chaperoning a group of 4 students and spend the night in a hotel room with them. So there are a range of ways that volunteers interact with our students, and our policies need to reflect those different levels of interaction. The next piece is our work with external organizations, or rather their work on our facilities. We have a couple different ways that external organizations work with us. Some use our space through the community use of schools contracting process, and we have clear guidelines for them. Others may be more difficult to tell from being part of the school. So a lot of schools will say, we have a golf club, we have a chess club, but those are actually external organizations. And so one of the things that we found is that it's going to be really, really important that parents understand what is a CMS program and what is not a CMS program. So we'll share more about how we'd like to approach that moving forward. And then finally, I already mentioned, but we very proactively screen our volunteers and have our contractors certify that they have done that. So our task force had pretty diverse representation. We had parents of elementary, middle, and high school students. We had key people from schools such as athletics, where they have unique safety concerns with having volunteer coaches. We had a custodian because they see everything that goes on in the school. We had representatives from community organizations like Amy, who've partnered with CMS for 15 years. We had an expert from Pat's Place. We had Janet, who really helped us understand abuse prevention in ways that really opened the eyes of the team. And then a number of internal folks, including CMS BOEs, community use of schools, volunteers, so those key groups involved. So we're really grateful to all the folks who put in the time to make this happen. There are several improvements that we've already put in place. So first, Lobby Guard is now standardized across all schools. We've been using Lobby Guard for years. It screens people against the sex offenders list. But in some schools, it was used also to check students in when they were late or to do various different things. It still checked everybody against the sex offenders list, but we've streamlined it and made it simpler so it's easier to manage and more likely that we just get the information from it that we need to. The next piece was reinforcing the message with principals that every person who does not work in that building needs to be screened. The superintendent made a big point about, if I walk into the building, I need to be screened. And that just is something that's really important, because even if you know the person and you've seen them a million times, you may not know of things that have happened in their life that might show up on that screen. So it's just important because that's updated every day for us to know who is in our building and that they're safe to have around our kids. The next is we updated the community use of schools contracts to have very clear start and end dates. And that's important because we want to keep those agreements fresh. We want to make sure that they have the most up-to-date expectations in them. And so that process is much cleaner now. Next, we required this fall for the first time at Open House that groups that are external to CMS identify themselves as such. So that earlier I talked about the golf club and the chess club. They had signs this year that said this group is independent of CMS. CMS does not recruit, screen, manage, or supervise their staff, so that parents know that it's not us and that they need to pay attention to that. In addition, we continue the effort of having a similar disclaimer on flyers for groups that are recruiting students at our schools. And then finally, we developed a protocol for how to manage safety on election days. So as y'all know, there are, the public and poll workers inside our schools on those days. And so we worked hard to make sure wherever possible that there was not any contact between students and folks from outside. But not all of our schools are laid out to make that possible. And so the committee also strongly felt that going forward, it would probably be much safer not to have school on an election day. So in a moment, I'm going to pass it off to Amy to share the recommendations, but I do want to point out something really important. One thing you'll notice up here is that that the word prevention comes up over and over and over again. And that's because while we can do, and we do, we are very solid about screening people. And that ensures that somebody with a criminal background or somebody who's on the sex offenders list cannot come into our schools or cannot be a volunteer working with our students. At the same time, we know that not everybody who would do a student harm will show up on either of those pieces. So putting prevention measures in place really makes a difference. For example, if you have a rule that a student is not supposed to go to the volunteer's house, that volunteer, if they did that, they'd be breaking a rule and there would be repercussions for that. It also prevents kind of giving them an opportunity to have potentially an inappropriate relationship. And so by putting those measures in place, what we do is we make it so that you can actually identify problematic behavior before somebody's doing something that really harms a child badly. So now I'm going to hand it over to Amy.
Good evening. So the first recommendation has to do with incorporating prevention expectations into agreements with external organizations. So I need to be forthright right now and say, for 13 years, McPie, the ministry I work with, has been in agreement with and in partnership with McClinic Middle School. The principal and I, and it's been several principals, have an eye-to-eye and a handshake and a very good relationship to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect students and our volunteers and staff. We've never had a written agreement. We're going to ensure that all of us have written agreements in place because it should happen, and it will help us be stronger in the future. It will ensure that we all understand where we're at, and then we put it in writing. So the challenge with requiring background checks is monitoring that process, and that's just something we always have to keep in the front of our minds. Whatever we say is a policy, the worst thing we can do is make it policy and then not make sure it happens. So we have to pick policies and figure out the best ways to reduce risk, knowing, unfortunately, risk is never zero. Okay? But we can reduce risk as far as we can, have policies in place, and then as long as we enforce those policies, feel that we're doing no harm. So we have to be sure that we enforce policies and that we are diligent to follow up anything we say is going to happen. So the second recommendation is to integrate student program safety measures into volunteer management. We're going to work to be sure that the volunteers have picture IDs that also indicate their level of volunteer clearance. Right now, we have certain levels of clearance. You can be cleared to be there only supervised. You can be cleared to be there unsupervised or with the ability to drive. I mean, there are levels, but there's not a clear way always to know, to know what level that is. So we want to be sure and orienting and being sure volunteers as well as the staff in schools know exactly what those levels are and what's expected and what's available for those volunteers. The third recommendation is talking about parents, partnering and engaging with parents. We have to ensure that parents understand what it means that this is not a CMS activity and what that puts on them and how they might go about vetting and what things they should look for, and that it's their responsibility to work with us. There will be a lot that involves to help be sure parents are our partners and that they're empowered to take care of their children. We think some of that is just innate, but it's not. Those are things that we need to help empower folks to understand and to know. they can opt out of certain things. Being a part of McPie, coming to family nights, we want the parents there. But it's a voluntary program. I don't want anyone to ever get the idea that, oh, it's required, I need to do this, right? But we want them to, and we want to draw them to the program and entice them. We'd love to have the parents too. So always figuring out how to get the information and informing parents, building that awareness, and helping parents do their very best job of taking care of their children along with us is going to be really important. And then the fourth recommendation is providing funding over time to design, implement, monitor, and manage. So staffing, training, a helpline, and I'll say a little bit about those. The training is going to be critical because a lot of that will be done online. But again, being sure people understand, here's where you draw that line, here's how you draw that line, here, and this is what would be crossing that line. So being sure that all volunteers, all outside agencies are aware of what the expectations are is going to be critical. The helpline, we want to learn about things as fast as possible. A lot of people are afraid to make an allegation unless they're sure if they have proof. But if you offer a place and if you're partnering with parents, we have the chance of learning about a potential issue before it becomes an issue so that we can take care of some things and monitor in the best way possible. So that's why that. Resources are going to include those photo ID. So there are certain things that will require funding to make sure that we are implementing this to the best degree that we can. I'm going to turn it back to Julia for the last part.
Thank you, Amy. This last piece is contracting with someone with expertise in this area. One of the things we noticed as we worked as a task force is different organizations have different guidelines. Some people would say you never have a child with just one adult. You always have to have two, or you always have to have 4 kids, or you always, well, some of those things we can't necessarily do. You know, if a parent doesn't pick up a child, you may end up with a child with just one adult. So how do you handle those things? What should the guidelines be? What should the line be? That's really the support that we want to get as we work with a consultant. And we were very lucky as we were looking through examples of policies from different organizations. The YMCA had just really solid, clear policies. And as we looked more into it, we found that the YMCA of America contracts with a consulting company named Presidium. And they have 20-plus years of experience and expertise, have worked with school districts, and so they've talked some to us about this, and we are excited that they have some good insight. Like with the example I gave of the principal being alone with a student, well, there are things you can do to make that situation safer, even if you can't have another adult there. And they walked us through some of that. So we're hoping that they'll help us with those kind of nuances and sticky situations. We want them to do a few things in particular. First is help us update policies to include more prevention as part of them. Right now, we're really solid on screening, and we really want to bring our prevention efforts to make them really clear in the policy as well. Next is we want to enhance our screening and selection processes. You can go beyond a background check. There are certain behaviors you might observe or certain things that you can pay attention to that might be warning signs. So we want to understand how to see those and make sure that other folks who are with our students can see those too. The next piece, which Amy already talked about, was training. And it's not just important for volunteers and external organizations. Our staff have to know how to supervise volunteers. Throughout this organization, people have to have a good sense of what things look like and what they don't, because people who may harm children don't necessarily look creepy or scary. They look, they're often extremely charismatic. Next is to review and, if necessary, refine our incident reporting system. We haven't heard anything negative about, but what we want to do is make sure that it's incorporating all the best practices and the latest research. We'd like to work with them to provide the helpline. That's something that they have experience with, so they can somebody can call and say, this is I don't know, this struck me kind of weird, and they can talk them through it, or they have appropriate connections in CMS and can escalate things appropriate. So we need somebody to support us on that. And then finally, we want to make sure we have a very clear system of accountability in place so that we're sure that all of this is implemented with fidelity. It's just, as Amy said before, it is worse to say we're going to do something and not do it than to not say we're going to do it. So we want to just make sure everything we implement is as it should be. So we appreciate you listening to the recommendations, and we're excited to hear any questions that you have.
Okay, board members? All right. Ms. Marshall?
First off, thank you so much for pulling this together, and I would really like to highlight the makeup of the task force that you included front office folks from CMS and custodians, because they know what goes on in the building. Yep. And I particularly want to highlight Ms. Daniels, because she and her group have been volunteer extraordinaires for a long time, and appreciate all the work. And anything we can do to make partnerships like that stronger is time well spent. So just quickly, I know that sometimes these things seem so onerous to the community. I think that, but everybody knows their importance. And churches, other organizations that deal with children are constantly thinking about this, and we need to be the leader. So I think anything we do in this space, we do it with integrity, and as you mentioned, we do what we say we're going to do. So thank you for that. Just really quickly, I noticed you talked about picture IDs. I know that's something very specific. We can do those, I believe, in our school sites, correct? So that shouldn't be very hard to do. I think anything we can do quickly to show that this is that we're moving with all speed would be great. So thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. Vice Bailey?
Thank you. And thank you for the diligence with which you have gone about gathering this information for us. I'm particularly appreciative of the fact that we're not trying to recreate the wheel in this endeavor, that you have sought out and discovered other organizations that are already doing this with fidelity, that have the expertise, that have the background and skill set that we had just not quite gotten together with, and that you have sought that out and will be learning from their expertise, and so that we don't have to spin our wheels trying to start out building it from scratch. And I'm very grateful about that, because that means we can get it on board and get it running much faster. Thank you.
Ms. Cheek?
Thank you. I actually got a notice yesterday that I needed to update my volunteer forms from CMS, so I believe that's just coming out. I hesitated, thinking that perhaps since my son's a senior, I don't need to do any more. But then I did it anyway. So I just, everybody in the community just, that can get involved, we do want them to be in our schools. And so I appreciate that you guys are trying to find a way to bridge the need for people to come and to work with our students and our staff to assist us in this journey. And with the need for our students to be as safe and our staff to be as safe as possible. So thank you for all the work on this. And for the McPie folks, y'all are just a great example of what dedicated and loving and caring community members can do and to change a school culture. And I just appreciate you. I've looked at you guys as an example. I wish you were farther up north, but I do appreciate everything you're doing down in the McClintock area. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Okay. Ms. Ellis Stewart?
Thank you. This was a great report, so thank you for the work of the committee and your team. I definitely agree getting more of our efforts into the prevention side of it. And so I'm wondering two things. There is an online course around mandatory reporting and recognizing when children are in unsafe situations, that depending on where a volunteer falls, that we may ask them to take. There's not a cost for it, through the North Carolina Child Abuse NC website. And then Also, we may want to consider, particularly since a lot of that kind of check-in work happens at the office, the folks up there are the first line of defense, making sure that all of them have had tiered levels of de-escalation training. I think that would go very, very far. You can use that at work and in your personal life. And then one question I also have, I know that next year the whole Real ID will take effect for federal buildings and for travel. Have you heard anything about school and school visitations where school systems are requiring the Real ID as opposed to kind of the traditional?
I have not heard that.
Okay. I think if we could maybe find out if there's anything percolating around that. One, just so people can be prepared, because getting that Real ID, whew, if you don't have it right, they'll send you back. And then my last question for you is really around, I like where you're talking about delineating groups that are non-CMS. Have we started to give those groups heads up that that's going to be happening and that's the requirement for them going forward?
We haven't started that process yet, but we haven't started that yet, but we can start it shortly.
Yeah, I think particularly since school's starting, and I know a lot of them do Peach Jar and all that kind of stuff, they feel like, oh, I'm in the family, that doesn't apply to me. It does. So
They did experience it last year, so all groups that were working with us last year had to have the signage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Dashew?
Well, three quick things. First of all, I want to thank you, Ms. Daniels and Ms. Jones, and all of the staff and community members who worked together on this task force. It was a year of deliberative, thoughtful, really important work with so many perspectives from the community brought to bear, and just really thank you for that. Sometimes when we have scary situations in our school, there's this knee-jerk reaction of, well, you have to do this, you have to do that, and I'm just so thankful that there's a year of thoughtful process going into adding to our circle of safety to keep our kids safe. That's the best way to do it. So thank you for that. And specifically, Ms. Daniels, as a former, not too long ago, McClintock mom, thank you for all that you do for that school. That's my neighborhood school, and you guys are just treasured partners. And so...
Two-way street.
Pardon?
It's a two-way street. McClintock's treasure to us as well.
I believe that. Yeah, that school is a gem, really is. And I guess I just want to highlight the importance of something that your task force uncovered is the importance for visitors to really, truly stop into the front office and check in and get that badge. Some parents or visitors are a little bit lackadaisical about it. Some don't even know it's a requirement, but it really is important for us to identify who belongs in the school and who doesn't. And students tell us it matters to them. They get a little nervous if they see someone and they're like, I don't know if they belong here. So it's just so, while we have the cameras on us, I just want to emphasize that. Please, when you visit a CMS school, do stop at the front office and sign in to the computer and get that badge. So thank you.
Thank you all for the work that went into this.
Thanks.
Okay? Yes. Sure.
Board members, I would like to, in addition to thanking Ms. Jones and Ms. Daniels, I would like to thank Ms. Francisco, our Chief of Staff, for leading this important work.
Okay. We now move to Board Policy First Reading for Proposed Policy IKEA, Credit Recovery. I turn to Dr. Jones as Chair of the Policy Committee to provide the first reading of this proposed new policy.
Policy Code IKEA Credit Recovery. Members of the Board, the item before us tonight is the first reading of the proposed creation of Policy IKEA Credit Recovery. As this is a first reading tonight, there can be no discussion on this recommended change at this time. This policy creation is in response to the State Board of Education, who amended their policy CCRE-001. That change requires the local Board of Education to create a policy and regulation regarding credit recovery. Based on that new requirement, the CMS staff created the policy that is before us tonight. This new policy was considered by the CMS Policy Committee on July 11th and was recommended for approval by a 3-0 vote. Therefore, Madam Chair, while this is our first reading of this policy, we will be holding a public hearing on this item tonight as well. We will hold our second public hearing and vote on this recommended policy creation at our August 13th board meeting. And with that, I conclude the first reading of Policy Code IKEA Credit Recovery.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. We now move to our public hearings. We have 4 public hearings tonight, and I am not going to read the rules for them because we have no one signed up to speak at any of our 4 public hearings. But I will give you the information on these public hearings so that you can know what they are. The first one would have been proposed revision to policy JFAC, reassignments and transfers. B was proposed revision to policy FF, naming facilities. C, proposed retirement of policy CFD, school-based decision-making. And the last one, proposed policy IKEA, credit recovery. Hopefully, since credit recovery will be coming up again for August 13th, someone may sign up to speak at that time. I will now declare the public hearing part of our agenda closed. We now move to requests from the public. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board. You may speak on any topic of your choice except for either individual student matters or specific personnel matters. No personal attacks will be allowed. Neither profanity or inappropriate language may be used. The board reserves the right to cut off any speaker who violates these rules. I will now call the following individuals to come down front to the microphones, and please speak in the order in which you are called. Our first speaker is Bobby Forrest, Colette Forrest, and Banu Valadidez. Is Banu here? She's right there. Are we ready with the timer? Okay. You may begin. Mr. Forrest.
Hello, my name is Bobby Forrest. I'm a CMS IB AB honorable student who's going to attend West Charlotte. I know, amazing. Please excuse my appearance because I just came from summer camp. Butler High School has 7 master teachers. Ardrey Hale has 4 master teachers. Providence has 4 master teachers. South Mecklenburg has 3 master teachers, and Northwest has 2. Guess how many West Charlotte has? 0. Zip. Nada. Zilch. Am I and my future classmates not worth the assignment? Are the present IB and AP students not worth the assignment? I know we are. We are both deserving and worthy of IB and AP master teachers. Please assign Masters IB and AP teachers to West Charlotte High School this 2019 fall and 2020 spring school year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, my name is Colette Forrest, and I am the proud parent of Bobby Forrest, a CMS certified talented and gifted student. Mr. Winston, out of the over 148,000 students in CMS, 1,330 students attend West Charlotte High School, and they deserve Master IB and AP teachers to be assigned to their campus. I thank Carol Sawyer for the data submitted to me, and as I read it, I was appalled when I saw West Charlotte High School numbers compared to Ardrey Hale, Butler, Providence, and other white, non-poverty schools. West Charlotte needs Master IB teachers assigned to their campus for the 2019-2020 fall-spring school year. And talking with the present West Charlotte High School IB and AP teachers, they do not even get return emails or phone calls from master teachers located at other schools. West Charlotte teachers deserve to have readily accessible Master IB and AP teachers on their campus, as do their white majority low-poverty schools. Mr. Winston, you, as I did, heard the pain and angst from that parent last week at one of the West Charlotte principal profile meetings as she spoke to the academic neglect and lack of support for her IB honor student that attends West Charlotte. We need a principal that values all students and will provide the infrastructure support for both IB, AP honor student and staff, and non-IB, AP honor students and staff. West Charlotte should have all of the same resources as Audrey Kell, Providence, and other majority white low-poverty schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Banu Valladares. I am the Executive Director of Charlotte Bilingual Preschool, where we prepare Spanish-speaking children for success in school and life by providing them with a really high-quality preschool education. And I'm here on behalf of Latin American Future Search Leadership, a group of 80-some Latino community members that have been meeting for the last 2 years to work together on behalf of the Latino community. If you think of a Latino organization that you know of, I'm representing them. I'm one of them. I wanted to start by thanking you, each one of you, for the work that you have done. Recently, the Latino community has had increased access and improved relationships with the board, the district, and the superintendent. And we hope to continue to have this representation and access in this time of transition. So really, my conversation today is just to remind you 25% of our children in the school systems represent the Latino community. So that's why it's so important that in the search for a new superintendent, we keep in mind representation through the process. So we want to make sure that the Latino community is represented through the selection process, that there's also Latinx representation in the newly established Equity Committee. We also had regular meetings with Dr. Wilcox, particularly with the Education Committee of the Future Search group. And he was always accessible, and we're hoping that this continues with the leadership of Mr. Winston and the future. We know we have a good relationship, but hope that we can continue to have your input and your ear. Also, Dr. Wilcox provided us with direct support and spoke on behalf of the immigrant children in the community, and we want to make sure that the search for the new superintendent includes that criteria so that we hire a new superintendent that will continue to recognize and support all of our students. Thank you very much, and you know how to find me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This concludes our request from the public. And we now move to our consent items. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of any items for individual consideration? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, thank you. And I turn to Acting Superintendent Winston to talk about personnel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, I have the honor of introducing our 3 newest principals in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We'll start with Ms. Shayna Ray. If you could please stand. Ms. Ray will become the newest principal of Windsor Park Elementary School. She has served at Windsor Park as assistant principal. She's also served as an assistant principal at Billingsville Elementary School, where she has also served as a math facilitator, as well as a teacher. Ms. Ray, thank you very much for agreeing to serve in this capacity, and wanted to give you a round of applause. Please don't sit just yet. If you have any family members and friends with you, would you please introduce them?
Okay. Well, first I have to say in CMS, we are taught to tell our story because our story is what makes us who we are. So I was a mom at the age of 16, and I was told by many people that my life was over. But I stand as a testament today because of the support that I received from my husband of 19 years, but we were also teenage boyfriend and girlfriend. And we have 4 beautiful sons together. My nieces, who are like my daughters, my parents, Rachel and Ted, my sisters, who are here, and my support system within CMS, coaches, Arlene Harris, who has actually allowed me to follow behind her and to understand that it's okay to lead with kindness and grace. And so I'm thankful for this opportunity and the staff at Windsor Park. I've never worked with a better staff. So I'm very fortunate to walk into a place where there are teachers who invest their time, their love, and their dedication every day into our Windsor Park learners. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Next, we have Daniel Gray, who will become the next principal of Hidden Valley Elementary School. Mr. Gray, will you please stand? Mr. Gray currently serves as assistant principal at Winding Springs Elementary. He's also served as an assistant principal at Cochran Collegiate Academy. In addition to that, he has served as a teacher, department chair, compliance facilitator, as well as a teacher at J.M. Alexander Middle School. Mr. Gray, congratulations. Would you please introduce any guests who you have brought with you tonight?
That's a tough act. In CMS, we are a big family. I would like to introduce my new Learning Community Superintendent, Mr. John Wall. But I've had the pleasure of working for the past 2 years with Kiara Oglesby, who I consider a very good friend. She's the Dean of Students at Winding Springs. Mrs. Courtney Wall, the principal at Winding Springs, who I also consider a dear friend. Mr. Cortland Reeves, the principal at Greenway Park, who has been a very strong support. He and I were in the Leaders for Tomorrow program together. And, of course, my beautiful wife of the last 20 years, Mrs. Linda Gray.
Thank you. Last but not least, we have Dr. Philip Johnson, the newest principal at Marie G. Davis K-8 School.
Dr. Johnson, you got your work laid out for you.
Dr. Johnson most recently served as an assistant principal at Westerly Hills Academy, as well as Harding High School. He has also been an assistant principal in Cabarrus County at J.M. Robinson High, as well as Harris Road Middle School. He's also been a teacher in CMS at Harding University High School and Coolwood Middle School. Congratulations, Dr. Johnson. Would you please introduce any guests you have with you tonight?
2 hard acts to follow. I have my sister, Carmen Brown, and my other sister, Robin Jones, here to support me. I also would like to thank Dr. Barnes for giving me the opportunity to lead Marie G. Davis, as well as the other leaders in CMS to help influence me. There's a wealth of experience right here that helped supported me in this new endeavor. But I don't want to leave out Malaysia Williams, my principal, as well as Alicia Johnson, who was my principal at Harding, and Dr. Curtis Carroll.
Welcome to all of you. We now move to our action items. And the first action item is proposed revisions to policy FF, naming facilities. I turn to Dr. Jones as chair of the policy committee to make a motion concerning the adoption of the revisions to this policy, and then to speak to her motion. As a reminder to the public, action items coming from one of the board's standing committees does not require a second. Dr. Jones?
Members of the board, the item before us tonight is the recommendation for approval of the proposed revisions to policy FF, naming facilities. These changes were requested by a member of the Board of Education to clarify the eligibility requirements before a CMS facility or any part of a CMS facility can be named in honor of an individual. These changes were considered by the CMS Policy Committee on May 9th and were recommended for approval by a 3-0 vote. So, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I move to approve the changes to policy FF as recommended.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. And seeing that we don't require a second, and before we move to a vote, is there any discussion, debate, or questions? Okay. Mr. Strain?
So whilst I sit on the policy committee and was fully supportive of the changes we brought forward, some further conversations in the community have brought to light some things that are challenging. I think the change that we made requiring an individual to be deceased for a minimum of 5 years for naming a school facility is right and appropriate. I think we have opportunities to recognize the service from some of our community members in our schools by naming parts of a facility for individuals that may require a different criteria. And right now what we did within the policy committee is we applied the same rules for naming a full facility as parts, whether that be a library or, in the case of that was brought forward by the community, tennis courts, right? Naming after tennis courts after a couple of coaches who were longtime tennis coaches and have wrapped up that service for that community and at that school and for those student athletes. And in looking at that, I thought, it really would give them an opportunity, them being the community, the school, to recognize that service, whether that be 15 years, 20 years, 25 years service. And so I am going to ask that we consider that. And with regards to policy FF and the changes, that we have a discussion about potentially having different criteria for the naming of the full facility, whereas an individual has to be deceased for 5 years, whereas an individual room part of the facility, which is in a different clause of this policy, perhaps a different criteria. And I would recommend we go ahead and strike the change that we've brought forward for the partial facility.
So what specifically are you asking, Mr. Strain?
So in policy FF, we have applied a clause for naming entire facilities. We have added no facility shall be named for any individual until such time that they have been deceased for a period of no less than 5 years. Similarly, in the second clause, naming parts of school buildings or other facilities, we've applied the same standard, no partial school facility and or school building as defined under this section shall be named for any individual until such time as they have been deceased for a period of no less than 5 years. In talking through this case and the contribution that those individuals have made at Independence High School, it seems to me to make sense that if we are looking at portions of the facilities where individuals have made a significant contribution over a long period, that we shouldn't have to wait as a community to recognize that service until they've been deceased for 5 years. And in fact, it would be an opportunity to name portions of the facility for those individuals whilst they are still living with us in order to recognize that service.
So is your request that this go back to the policy committee? Is that what you're asking?
Well, what I was actually making was a
motion?
A motion to strike that portion of that second clause, the naming for parts of school buildings and other facilities and consider that amended
Okay.
policy.
And I thought I heard a second from, okay. May I ask, did you all discuss this in policy?
I wasn't at that meeting, but I have some different reasons for that
Okay.
myself.
All right. Okay. And do you want to further speak to your motion?
No, I've spoken to the motion.
Okay.
Can I speak to it?
Let me go with Ms. Stewart, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ella Stewart.
I had mentioned several meetings ago, a couple of months ago, our business meeting, that I wasn't in favor of these changes. I am perfectly fine with our current wording, which indicates simply that a person needs to be deceased to have the entire facility named for them. So I don't feel that we have to have the additional qualification of deceased for 5 years or more. Similarly to Mr. Strain, the second change, which starts on line 33 on the second page about a partial school naming, I think there are opportunities for us to give people their flowers while they are yet living. I was the school SLT president at Harding when we named our media center after Dorothy Scott Scroggins, and I think that we all recognize the history and legacy that Dot has and what she has done for our community. And I think, if we have to wait 5 years or more for instances like that to rename a media center, to rename a cafeteria, to rename athletic facilities, we miss opportunities to recognize, as Mr. Strain said, the contributions of persons in our community. So I, too, am in favor of striking that entire sentence.
Okay. Ms. Cheek?
I was fortunate to attend the naming of the gym floor at North Meck High School several years ago to Coach Leroy Holden. Coach Holden served as the coach and athletic director at North Meck High School since probably kids that graduated that were my age were there, literally, 30-plus years. He also was instrumental in the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, and that gym was named after him, and he and his wife, who basically ran the Booster Club for decades as well, were both there to accept that honor, and it makes me very happy when I see that. I also was sitting with John Washam from Cornelius when we named the library after his late wife, Violet. John Washam's father was J.V. Washam, who the school is named after. When the school opened, Violet was an elderly woman, and she came to the school every week and had a committed day that she read to children. And shortly after her death, within a few months, the school asked if we could name the library after Miss Violet. And the tears of joy in Mr. Washam's face, knowing that he's also an older fella, and it just brought him such joy. And I happened to attend the North Meck Rotary about 3 months after that, and he still came up and hugged me and said that naming that library after his late wife was just one of the most meaningful things and had really helped him through a very difficult time after her loss. So I could not support this policy as it is without removing the partial and portion of school portion with it. I think that we are losing opportunities to honor those people who are doing great things in our schools. And so I would please ask that we remove this.
All right, thank you.
Those are just but a few of the examples I know.
Dr. Jones?
I would like to add that I think my colleagues have made very cogent comments that I too would agree that let's recognize persons who have embraced our schools and given significantly to it, that we do make this change.
All right. Okay. Kendall, do you have something to say? Sanders?
I think that it is important to honor them right there on the spot, because it's harder to get students back that, that person may have an impact on their life. So it'll be harder to get them back 5 years after, or however many years after, to bring them back to the school to actually celebrate that person. So I do think doing it in that time will be a better option.
Okay. Is there any other discussion, debate, questions? Hearing none. We're going to be voting on the amended motion. Wait a minute.
Chair, you're going to be voting on the motion to amend.
The motion to amend, okay. All right, and I won't ask you to repeat it, so I hope you'll write it up and make sure the board clerk gets it. Does everybody understand? Okay. All in favor of that motion, please show by a sign of raising your hand. Okay, that's unanimous, okay? No one's opposed. So, now we go back to the main motion.
No, ma'am, you vote on the motion as amended.
The motion as amended, all right. Whew. Glad I don't have to read it. Okay. All in favor of the motion as amended, let it be known by saying aye. 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 Opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you, board, for being agreeable tonight. We now go to proposed revision to policy JFAC, reassignments and transfers. I turn to Dr. Jones as chair of the policy committee to make a motion concerning the adoption of the revisions to this policy and then to speak to her motion.
Policy JFAC, reassignments and transfers. Members of the board, the item before us tonight is the recommendation for approval of the proposed revisions to policy JFAC, reassignment and transfer. These changes were requested by a member of the Board of Education to clarify the process by which children of CMS staff are given priority in student reassignment and transfers. The proposed changes reflect the combined efforts of the Policy Committee and CMS staff after discussions at our April and May Policy Committee meetings. These changes were considered by the CMS Policy Committee on May 9th and were recommended for approval by a 3-0 vote. So, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I move to approve the changes to policy JFAC as recommended.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. As before we move to a vote, is there any discussion, debate, questions? Okay, Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. Can you be specific as to what changes are that we're making to this policy?
Okay. Do we have the specific document?
Madam Chair, if I could, I would like to invite Keisha Craven-Howell to the podium.
Yeah. Okay. That's definitely a specific document.
Good evening, board members. I believe the question is what specific changes were made to policy JFAC. We added some language just to clarify the priorities that staff had when requesting reassignment and transfer for their students. So we added language like staff members are guaranteed the ability to be able to request that their children attend the school at which they work. We also added language that discussed where we have schools where space is limited, how we would prioritize among child to staff requests. So things like getting a child within close proximity to a school where their parent works, getting a child assigned to a school with a bell schedule that facilitated their parents' work schedule. And I should say the examples that I just gave were of school-based staff, but certainly the child to staff provision in the policy extends to all staff in CMS.
Thank you.
Ms. Sawyer?
I would just clarify that while language was added to the policy, the new language merely clarified existing practice.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a substantive change in practice.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Ravenhouse. All right. You clear, Ms. Byers-Bailey? All right. All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Madam Clerk, that was unanimous. Thank you, Board, and thank you, Policy Committee, for the hard work that you have put in and are about to put in some more. All right, now we move to our reports and information items, and we have several things on the agenda tonight. A is report on budget amendments for June 2019. I turn to the acting superintendent for this report.
Presented as is.
Oh, that's a new way. Okay. Report on capital project ordinances for June 2019. I turn to the acting superintendent for this report.
Presented as is.
All right, thank you. And now we move to report from superintendent. I turn to our acting superintendent, Winston, for his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I want to begin by thanking this board and the community for the opportunity to serve our students, families, staff, and Charlotte-Mecklenburg community members. As I have shared privately with you, our board, and now openly here tonight, you have my word that I will lead with integrity, putting the needs of children first, and that I expect nothing less than exceptional leadership from every employee and staff. On staff. We are in a time of leadership transition in our district, but our team's focus on students remains clear because they are what matter most. As your acting superintendent, I am committed to providing stability, to steady leadership, and to making sure our work in CMS continues without interruption. Our team, and we have a strong team, we've got a little more than 5 weeks planned for the return of staff and students, so there is plenty of work to do, and we intend to make this one of the best openings we've ever had. Speaking of opening the school, I would like to let members of our community know that Mr. Mike Turner has agreed to serve as interim principal at West Charlotte High School as we continue to search for a permanent principal. Mr. Turner is a retired principal at Garinger High School. Next, I'd like to just talk briefly about enrollment. Enrollment in CMS is open right now. CMS encourages families to take advantage of enrollment for the 2019-2020 school year. How do you do that? You may visit the district student placement office located in the Smith Family Center at 1600 Tyvola Road, or you may download the enrollment forms at wearecms.com. Or you may even visit any traditional CMS school to pick up or complete the enrollment form. I also want to just mention our summer graduation. This Thursday, July 25th, at 8:30 a.m. at Bojangles Coliseum, we will have members of our student body who will be graduating, and I want to say to all of our newest graduates in the class of 2019 and their families, congratulations. Finally, I want to encourage you to please keep in touch with us at wearecms.com and on social media. Thank you again, and I look forward to continuing this work together.
Thank you, sir. Now, reports from board members. I'll recognize any board member who wishes to make a report. All right, Ms. Byers-Bailey.
Thank you. I know we think that summer vacation is here and people have scattered and that CMS has taken a recess. However, District 2 is busy. We have had not one but 2 meetings to garner from the community and the parents and the students what criteria they want in their next principal. We had a robust turnout at both meetings, and we garnered a wealth of information in terms of input as to the characteristics, the criteria, the curriculum that the community wants to see in West Charlotte, which is a neighborhood school. So I want to thank all of the parents, all of the students, all of the community that attended both of those meetings, or either one of those meetings. We heard you, and we are planning to put forth every effort to meet your expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sawyer?
Good evening. Thanks to the community support of the 2017 bond referendum, Briarwood Elementary School, Briarwood Academy, will receive a brand new building to open in in the fall of 2021. In preparation for that, we're having a community meeting this Thursday at 6 p.m. at Briarwood to encourage community members, families to come to the school and help us design the new school, to offer their input on what their vision of the new Briarwood Academy should be. So please join me on this Thursday evening at 6 p.m. at Briarwood Academy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Marshall?
Speaking of the bonds, we in my area have a lot going on in the world of construction. So I want to highlight the Lansdowne Elementary School community engagement meeting that happened last week. It was incredibly well attended with neighbors and families with students in that school. And we had we had to go make copies of additional paperwork so people could put their input into the design aspects of the school. So I'm very excited. It's going to be a great project. Montclair is proceeding with the building site cleared all the way to the fence on all sides of the property. So that's on track, as well as our Collinswood Language Academy site at the back of the Smith Center. So drive around and see your tax dollars at work, because a lot's going on. It's really exciting to see these schools coming out of the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me go this way. Okay, Ms. Sanders?
Okay, so the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council recently partnered up with CMPD, and we actually went through an active shooter training this summer, and I was a little on edge about going to it, but it was actually really informative, and I really think that all students should, or at least high school students, should have the opportunity to go and talk with them and meet with them, because they had a lot of great ideas. And even though it was a little nerve-wracking and, it made me a little nervous, it definitely was something that every high school student should experience.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ella Stewart?
Thank you. This weekend, several of us, Chairman McCray, Dr. Jones, and Ms. Byers-Bailey, we had the opportunity to participate in a series of events that become a staple in our community, the Gray Classic. This year marked the 11th annual Gray Classic, sponsored by Herb and Felicia Gray. And I bring this event up because the event has evolved over the last 11 years, and now it's a whole weekend of 7 events. And the 4 of us were able to attend the Women's Empowerment Brunch on Sunday, and were we empowered? Saturday, thank you. I was so empowered, I don't know what day it was. But one of the reasons I bring this up is because this event is really set up to provide support and funds of the 100 Black Men of Charlotte, which many of you may know provides support, mentoring, educational direction for young Black males in our community. And during the Women's Empowerment Brunch on Saturday, 2 of the young men that they have worked with for many years, one young man said he had been a part of the program since 5th grade. The other young man said he had been a part of it for so long he couldn't remember how long he had been a part of it. But those 2 young men both received significant scholarships to support them as they transition from CMS graduates. Both are students who graduated from North Mecklenburg High School. One of them will be attending UNC Chapel Hill in the fall, and the other one will be attending North Carolina A&T State University.
Aggie pride.
Nationwide. So I want to thank the Grays, but also to thank the 100 and all of the folks who have supported that event, because it allows young people, young males in particular, to see not only their educational dreams come true, but also that they can have the dollars to support their education. And it was a great event. Those 2 young men, and I got the names, Mary, Michael Boyd Jr. and Delwyn Fields were the 2 young men that received their scholarships this weekend.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anyone else? Well, okay.
Sorry. I just have a quick update. Just wanted to thank the Charlotte Black Women's Caucus for your meeting this weekend. There was a room full of very powerful women leaders of our community who heard reports from Acting Superintendent Ernest Winston, as well as the director of our CMS Foundation, Sonia Gant, and also had reports from representatives of the Ombudsman Office, and asked some really great questions and really reaffirmed their ongoing support for the children of CMS. There are just a lot of educators and retired educators in the room, and just some very powerful partners of our school system. And I just wanted to acknowledge the women of that caucus, and thank you for having us out, and thank you for your partnership.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I would like to say that a large portion of this board is going to be traveling to Boston to attend an educational leadership symposium being held at Harvard. And we are going to walk those hallowed halls and do a lot of educational leadership work while we are there. Our assignments have been coming in fast and furious, and they don't mean to give us a free moment before we get there and when we get there. So I do want you to know that I am proud of this board and for us accepting the invitation to go up and be with other urban boards of education there at Harvard University. So thank you. Now, seeing that there's nothing else, I would now ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you all.